Attorney General William Barr testified in Congress today after news broke that Special Counsel Robert Mueller complained to Barr about his description of Mueller's report. For more on this, it's time for a closer look. Let's just remember the public waited almost 2 years for Robert Mueller's final report. If you tuned into the news, it's basically all you heard about. Everyone wanted to see it. This thing was more highly anticipated than the last Avengers movie and almost as long. I hope my burn doesn't affect your box office. Everyone wanted answers to some basic questions. What happened in 2016? What was Trump's involvement? And what did he do after the fact to interfere in the investigation? But when the report was finally delivered, the first we heard about it wasn't from Mueller himself, but from William Barr, Trump's handpicked attorney general. Barr sent that infamous 4-page letter summarizing Mueller's 448-page report, which right off the bat is impossible. You can't boil a report that long down to 4 pages, and you shouldn't try. That's like saying the Battle of Winterfell was about a dude who smoked too much weed and thought he was a bird. And I don't want to make this all about Bran, but Bran, buddy, what are your powers and when are you going to use them to be helpful? You're like, Bran, I know you can hear me, Bran. You're like Superman using his X-ray vision to heat up a Hot Pocket. Do you hear me, Bran? Bran, don't do that eye thing. Oh. I don't know why I bother with this guy. Barr's initial letter basically said there was no collusion and that Trump was not guilty of obstructing justice, and it was a very successful PR campaign because it shaped the initial media coverage of Mueller's report before we actually got to see it. And on top of that, it allowed Trump to claim over and over again that he had been exonerated.
It was a complete and total exoneration.
The Mueller report was great. It could not have been better.
The result was great. No obstruction, no collusion, no anything. Total exoneration, complete vindication.
Everybody waited for the Mueller report. Then it turns out that there's no obstruction, no collusion, no anything.
I won. No collusion, no obstruction. I won.
The finding was very, very strong. No collusion, no obstruction, no Russia, no nothing.
Trump went so over the top, he literally claimed there was no Russia. The report was very strong. Mueller said there was no obstruction, no collusion, and the country of Russia, it doesn't even exist. In fact, Trump went so far in celebrating after Barr's letter that he claimed Democrats were on life support.
After 3 years of lies and smears and slander, the Russia hoax is finally dead. The collusion delusion is over, and they're on artificial respirators right now. They're getting mouth-to-mouth resuscitation.
They need mouth-to-mouth. Every time you do a rally, you look like a guy who got locked inside a sauna overnight. But despite Trump celebrating, we now know Barr's initial letter and press conference summarizing Mueller's report were lies. First of all, Barr left out all the evidence Mueller gathered about obstruction of justice, and on top of that, he left out key parts of sentences that he quoted from Mueller's report. Here's CNN explaining one glaring example of that.
Mr. Barr cherry-picked this line.
Investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities.
But context is key. Mr. Barr ignored the first half of the line. The investigation also identified numerous links between the Russian government and the Trump campaign. And this line, the campaign expected it would benefit electorally from information stolen and released through Russian efforts.
You can't leave out part of a sentence like that. That's a huge difference. That's the difference between telling a bartender who takes your keys, I've had 4 beers, 6 shots of whiskey, 4 lines of cocaine, 10 margaritas, but I'm good to drive, and I'm good to drive. So we already knew Barr's initial letter was misleading, and now we know we're not the only ones who thought that, because another person who complained about it was Robert Mueller himself.
We've got breaking news at this hour that one of the chief criticisms of Attorney General William Barr's summary of the Mueller report was made by none other than the special counsel himself, Robert Mueller.
Justice Department officials familiar with the issue tell NBC News that 3 days after Barr released his summary of Mueller's findings, the special counsel, in a letter reviewed by the Washington Post, said Barr's descriptions did not fully capture the context, nature, and substance of Mueller's 448-page report.
Wait, so you're telling me Donald Trump was lying when he said this?
No collusion, no obstruction, no Russia, no nothing.
Damn it! But I already took Russia out of my map! Also, just as a general rule, you never want to get a letter from Robert Mueller. You don't even want to get a look from Robert Mueller. If I bumped into someone on the street and I looked up and saw that face, I would need
Mouth-to-mouth resuscitation.
So now we know that even Mueller himself complained that Barr's letter was misleading, which is shocking because Barr was specifically asked in a previous congressional hearing if he knew how Mueller felt about his letter summarizing Mueller's findings. And Barr told members of Congress he had no idea.
Reports have emerged recently, General, that members of the special counsel's team are frustrated at some level with the limited information included in your March 24th letter, that it does not adequately or accurately necessarily portray the report's findings. Do you know what they're referencing with that?
No, I don't.
Did Bob Mueller support your conclusion?
I don't know whether Bob Mueller supported my conclusion.
Yeah, you did. There was a letter, and there's no way you just forgot about a letter from Robert Mueller. That's like forgetting about a note on your windshield that says, "I know what you did last summer." So now we know that the guy who spent almost 2 years putting together a 448-page report about a criminal conspiracy to interfere in the 2016 election complained that Trump's handpicked attorney general misled the country about that report. That's huge news. And yet, when they had the chance to ask Barr about that news in a hearing today, Republican senators mostly acted like it didn't happen, like Senator Lindsey Graham. Now remember, this guy is the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he's holding a hearing with the Attorney General of the United States about the Mueller report. So you'd expect that he'd at least read the whole thing, right?
Here's the Mueller report. You can read it for yourself. It's about 400 and something pages. Can't say I've read it all, but I've read most of it.
What do you mean you haven't read it? That was the assignment. Are you the guy who shows up to book club and says, "I'm really excited to talk about Moby Dick, but if we could just avoid any details about what happens to the whale, that'd be great. I didn't get to any of the whale parts." I know it's long, but senators should read the whole report. It's possible. I mean, Elizabeth Warren did it.
I was on an airplane yesterday and started reading it, read it way into the night last night, and I got to the end.
I'm impressed that she read a 400-page legal document on an airplane. And now you know, if you sit next to Elizabeth Warren on a night flight, she gonna have her light on. Oh, now time to get some sleep. Oh no, Elizabeth Warren! So Graham admitted he hadn't even read the whole report, and then he decided to spend the rest of his time harping not on Mueller, but on the GOP's favorite obsession, Hillary Clinton. Specifically, he went back and read old, unearthed texts from FBI agents involved in the Hillary Clinton email investigation to claim that they were biased against Trump.
This is what Strzok said on February the 12th, 2016. Now, he's in charge of the Clinton email investigation. Oh, he's Trump's abysmal. I keep hoping the charade will end and people will just dump him. February the 12th, 2016. Page is the Department of Justice lawyer assigned to this case. March 3rd, 2016. God, Trump is a loathsome human being. Strzok. Oh my God, Trump's an idiot. Page, he's awful. I cannot believe Trump is likely to be an actual serious candidate for president. July the 21st, 2016. Trump is a disaster.
I love that Graham thinks it's an incredible gotcha to read a bunch of text messages from FBI officials calling this guy a disaster. I mean, look at him. If you saw him on the street and had no idea who he was, you'd say, "Man, that guy's a disaster." But the best part was when Graham read a text that had an expletive in it and maybe didn't realize that he was being broadcast live on cable news.
October the 19th, 2016. Trump is a idiot. He's unable to provide a coherent answer. Sorry to the kids out there.
Wow, Lindsey Beauregard Graham, I do declare. Man, you know, it's getting so you can't even take your kids out of school on a Wednesday morning and watch a congressional hearing together as a family. Graham definitely. Graham definitely forgot this thing was being broadcast live on cable news. He probably assumed he was just on C-SPAN, where you can say and do whatever you want because nobody is watching. I turned on C-SPAN the other day and it was just a couple of dogs humping in an empty chamber. People don't know, C-SPAN's like 90 Cinemax. At 3 a.m. they hold hearings, but they're just like blurred out. But aside from dropping an F-bomb on live TV, Graham also decided to briefly dabble in what was supposed to be the main point of the hearing, the Mueller report. Now, in the actual report, Mueller listed 10 times Trump may have obstructed justice, and he specifically turned it over to Congress to hold Trump accountable for those instances. And yet, Graham brushed it off, saying Trump couldn't be guilty of obstruction of justice because it didn't work.
You have to have specific intent to obstruct justice. If there's no underlying crime, pretty hard to figure out what intent might be if there was never a crime to begin with. The president never did anything to stop Mueller from doing his job. So I guess the theory goes now, okay, he didn't collude with the Russians and he didn't specifically do anything to stop Mueller, but attempted obstruction of justice of a crime that never occurred, I guess is sort of the new standard around here. We'll see if that makes any sense. To me, it doesn't.
Wait, so now your argument is that attempted obstruction of justice isn't a crime. I'm no lawyer, but last I checked, attempting to do something illegal is also a crime. If you get arrested for chasing a guy down the street with a knife, you can't go to court and say, sure, I tried to kill him, but he was too fast. Again, the report lists 10 different times Trump tried to interfere in the investigation or tried to get other people to interfere in the investigation. But Graham is arguing that because Trump never specifically told anyone to obstruct justice, he can't be guilty of obstruction of justice, which is a ridiculous argument. But don't take it from me. Take it from 1999 Lindsey Graham.
He doesn't have to say go lie for me to be a crime. You don't have to say let's obstruct justice for it to be a crime. You judge people on their conduct, not magic phrases.
First of all, how is it that young Lindsey Graham looks like more of an adult than current Lindsey Graham? Now he looks like a 12-year-old boy who put gray dye in his hair for a school play. 20 years from now, he's just going to be a baby in a wig. Second, what do you mean magic phrases? What's an example of a magic phrase?
Trump is a idiot.
Okay. Also, Trump did have a specific intent to obstruct justice. If you'd read the whole report, you would know that, because in the report, Mueller's team specifically wrote that Trump had a motive to end the investigation because he was afraid they would find facts about the campaign and the president personally that the president could have understood to be crimes. That's why he repeatedly tried to interfere in the investigation. For example, according to Mueller's report, Trump told his former White House counsel, Don McGahn, to fire Mueller. That anecdote is included in Mueller's report, along with some colorful language from McGahn.
Although McGahn recalled receiving multiple calls from the president on the same day, he was not certain of the specific dates, but he was confident that he had at least 2 phone conversations with the president in which the president directed him to call the acting attorney general and have the special counsel removed. It's also the colorful reporting from this report where Don McGahn says to Reince Priebus, which is the 3rd witness to this incident, the president asked me to do some crazy.
Man, cable news is feeling salty today. You got senators dropping F-bombs, anchors saying the words crazy. When Wolf Blitzer found out about the Mueller letter, he fully went off the rails.
All right, we got some important breaking news. Has just.
So we have all this information from Mueller's report, and yet instead of taking advantage of the rare opportunity to ask the Attorney General of the United States about the possibility that the President of the United States committed obstruction of justice, Republicans chose instead to spend most of their time obsessing over a person who wasn't even in the room.
The Inspector General found that during the department's investigation of Hillary Clinton for mishandling highly classified information, there was a culture of unauthorized media contacts.
We've heard a lot about the Steele dossier. Mr. Steele, of course, is a former British intelligence officer hired to do opposition research by the Hillary Clinton campaign.
Now, he's in charge of the Clinton email investigation.
There were 2 investigations here. One was an investigation of Donald Trump. There was another investigation of Hillary Clinton.
Oh my God, guys, let it go. 1,000 years from now, when global warming has destroyed the planet and hordes of zombie bandits roam the countryside, a gang of survivors is going to find an abandoned room in the Capitol with these words scrawled in blood: "What about Hillary's emails?" What's clear here is that Trump's handpicked attorney general orchestrated a PR campaign to mislead the public over Robert Mueller's findings before anyone actually got to see them. And now we know Mueller himself was upset about it. If you're going to read something, don't leave out key words. Read the whole thing. You don't like Lindsey Graham.
Trump is a idiot.
This has been A Closer Look.